All right, everybody, we're going to make some tileable concrete in Substance Sampler. So I've got this 4K texture right here that I took a picture from my Barnes concrete floor, and I'm just going to drag that right on top of my cube. I want to select image to material, say import. It's going to think for a little bit. It's going to try to analyze the mesh and see what it comes up with, and hopefully it won't take too long. Usually by default it's going to be set to ground, and this is actually ground, so we don't really have to change that. There's all kinds of different settings that you can do in here. The micro details, like how much small detail you're going to get in your normal map. Medium detail, is kind of that mid-size. So it's basically looking at a range. So like micro detail would be like these really small details, and then medium detail would be like larger value changes. And like if I run that up higher, you can see. Give it a second. Did it already change? I think it did. Let me go ahead and just reset that. See if we can see this change. Yeah, there you go. So it's a little bit hard to catch. It's probably easier if you do it yourself, but you'll get like these bigger, lumpier shapes with the large details, and you'll get the really small shapes, the really small details. Usually you don't want to like go too crazy on the tiny details. It's probably gonna make your stuff look swimmy. And then we have stuff like roughness. So we can take a look at this and just get closer in here. We haven't tiled it yet, but we can go ahead and like look at the roughness, and you could determine how rough is this concrete. If I hold shift and right click, I can move my light around. I know just from experience that it does reflect lights, that like I have shop lights and it reflects it a little bit. So I would say this is probably a little bit too rough. So I can bring this down a little bit to darken this so we get a little bit of a shine. You can change it to shiny, but I would say this is probably still a little bit matte, but then it has, let's just bring this down even more. Let's see if we can get this just right. Let's see. I think we're getting a little bit closer now. It's kind of thinking for me. You could always add like dirt on top of it, and that's in layers. You can play around with a bunch of stuff. We'll go over some of this stuff, but I'm gonna try to keep this one pretty simple. Obviously variation. We can play with this, and I suggest that you just go in and play around with these. The variation it looks like it's bringing more contrast into this one, so that means that you're gonna get like changes over the surface. That could be enough. Like that might be like, oh yeah, that's good enough. And you just you go with that. Albedo's tying into the actual color texture and how it's going to affect the albedo. And then delighting intensity. This is actually, so they're trying to basically pull lighting information that might have been in the scene or in your image, out of it, so that way it doesn't look like it was, you have any like sharp highlights. It's all turned all the way up, so I'd probably leave it like that. And we can move on from this particular node. I'm going to go into make a tile. So that would be kind of the next thing you want to do, is just go make a tile. We'll go back to the color. And then now we've got, let me just hold shift and right click, and drag my light. Now we've got like this, we can see that like it's tiling. We can get a little closer. I like to look at it at an angle so you can see, and change the lighting so you can see what it looks like. Because you can pretty much still see there's kind of a seam in here. So, you can play with the threshold. This will probably mess everything up. If you don't get this right, like sometimes you'll actually still see seams. So you can see right here how it's just put like a patch in the middle. And as you adjust this, it's adjusting those patches. And you can just always reset it back to where it was. So I might want to just like adjust it a little bit and see if I can get this so it's a little bit better. But I think what's happening here, see, the line is very, very fine right now. So I may want to first work with like smoothness and contrast to smooth out these edges here. So we're just going to go ahead and let me pull the contrast out. There we go. So the contrast is really smoothing out that edge a lot. So you're getting a little bit of blending. And I just want to see what happens if I pull this way up. I'm not really seeing on this one too much change between the smooth. Color equalizer is important. If I took this all the way, well, if you bring it all the way up, you'll see that like you get a lot more color variation in here. You may want that. It's almost like this is doing a high pass and then blending it in. If you bring it way down, you'll see it get like super detailed. So yeah, this is basically looks like a high pass, like a built-in high pass. So I may want to do something like this. Like this looks okay. And you're going to want to check, you'll notice that some of these edges you'll see seams here, but you want to check there's actually like one side of the cube where it should be tiled over the edges. There's a lot of spots on this one. So this is something where you may want to stamp out some of the spots, and that's where you would come in with the clone stamp tool. So I can go ahead and you could just hit the clone stamp and it will come up. It will change back to having a 2D, but I'm going to just change it to 2D only and just look at it like this, and I'll hit the clone stamp. And so since we have like this tileable thing going on, this is like the source that it's going to clone stamp from. So I can move this around. And then I can go ahead and take my brush and I can make my brush bigger. So you can hit like close brackets or open brackets. Should make the brush bigger. It's kind of going slow. It stopped moving. I don't know why. Okay, we'll do it. We'll do it this way if we need to. This is brush size. Oh, maybe that's as big as it goes. That's crazy. I don't know why it's so. Okay, so because that also ties into once you're on the clone stamp, you can go in and look at the source position. Like you can actually move it in here, so you can just slide the source position around. So you want to find like an area that's blank if you're gonna get rid of, you know, some kind of like spots in here. Like I want to get rid of these obvious spots, and I can just start basically stamping there. And you can see it did this certain radius, so you can go ahead and, you know, check the threshold, how large you want that, or small. So if you just want like just to cover that one little area, you know, I can do something like that, and you can blur the edges. Come on. Maybe smoothness too. And I'll leave the precision high. I want the precision to be high. Let's blur it a little bit more, see if we can see the change. Yeah, I can see the change. It's very slight. It's a large texture, so the blur is kind of like, you don't see it too much, or you don't see it change that much in the video. But yeah, you can go ahead and get rid of like certain spots here. Like I might want to move this over here. You don't want to keep, well actually, so this thing is, you're going to want to drop another one on here. You can see like I can move this around and it's just going to change how that's blending. So like I might like this position more. And so I can drop another clone stamp in here. So this is all procedural. And so then this way now I can go ahead and just start stamping out right there. I can take the threshold smaller. Let's say I don't want it that big. Maybe a little bit bigger. There we go. And then I can go ahead and move this to where I think it blends in best. And obviously you're not going to want to put it over another really distinct spot. So we can work through all of these here. Let me do a new one. And as you can see, it's stacking these. So they're all within the same clone stamp. Do something like that. And let me make the threshold smaller because I don't want it going outside. Maybe just a little bit more right there. I'm barely, just barely touching this thing. That should be okay. And then you can move this around a little bit. Like so. Oh, I had it good. and then it changed. So yeah, something like that. So as you're looking to just get rid of like really distinct spots that might tile more over the surface. So right now, if we go back to the 3D view, we're starting to get less of these really defined spots in there. So I'll maybe do another one. And something like that. Okay, just to move on, you can spend as much time on this as you want, trying to work everything out. I think for right now, this will work fine. So right now, I mean, you could technically go ahead and export this. You could say, okay, it's done. It's tileable texture. I'm going to export it. So export as. And go into your material settings. Obviously, we don't, I mean, you can export this stuff if you need it, but if you don't need it, you're just working with these three, you can go ahead and do that. So that would be fine. right there. But I'm going to do like one more thing just to show like a fancy, it's not too fancy, but just to show something you could do in here beyond that. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add another layer, and we're going to add a tile. I'm forgetting the name. Floor tile, that's the one I want. So I'll just throw a floor tile on here, and by default it's going to think for a second, and it's going to work a tile type of shape in here and add grout to it. So you can see here, this is basically the results we're getting. If you want to, at this point, you can go in here and say displacement, and you can turn up the quality. That's basically going to just make more subdivisions for it to displace, and you can play with the height. This is one of those things where like if you go too far, you can see like that's not going to look good. So you want to get just what you want, but not too much, because otherwise it's not going to work out right. And then there's a bunch of settings inside of here, so this is kind of fun. And that's why I want to show it before we finish this one off. So you can go with like color variation. I'm going to just make it really extreme at first so you can see what's happening. And wait for it. Takes a second. So that's like super extreme. Maybe you just want like a little bit different color, so you just knock that back just a tiny bit. And what'll happen is that you'll just get a tiny bit of like value variation in here. Maybe pop it back a little bit more. And wait for it. There you go. So maybe that's closer to where I want. You can play with like the bevel radius. We can go ahead and I like to, if you want to see how these things work, go extreme first and then back it off, because you don't want to like sit there and wait and it takes a bit to run anyway. So you might as well just find out what's happening. If you only change it a little bit, you might not know what it's actually doing. So we've done that, which, that might look more interesting. I kind of like it, except for the grout obviously is like massive now. So then we'd have to go ahead and change the actual size of this. We have some of the other parameters in here. Let's see here. Basic parameters, X amount. This is how many tiles you actually have. So if you want to increase the amount of tiles. Pattern rotation. This is neat because you can angle these. Wait for it. Everything in this program takes a little time. So just be aware. So I don't actually want that, but it looks cool. It's fun. You can get this to work where it looks good. Shape scale. Okay, so here's where you get into, we're at 0.95. So let's just say we want, let's see what 1 does. Like I've always said, let's go extreme, and let's see how tight that makes these close together. So you can see, because of like if at 1 normally these would get really, really close, but because I've gone ahead and messed with the radius that I messed with. So now it's gonna go back, and you can see now the tile's like really, really tight, close together. So you just have the small grout. And let's just maybe increase it a little bit and see what happens. I like the breakup that it did, but I would like it to not be so far apart. So this makes it look a little bit less perfect. So you can do something like that. Okay, next thing in here is, let's see here, we have the shape scale random. Okay, so obviously, you can pop this up and it's going to go ahead and randomize the size of these. Your mileage may vary. I only did it a little bit, so I sort of broke my own rule. Is that if you're trying to figure out what this thing's doing, go extreme and then start backing it off. What I usually do is, like, just to test stuff, is I'll go like pretty high and then I'll half it. So like you say, oh well, obviously I don't want that, so let's go half and see how that looks. Yeah, so not really loving that, but a little bit of variation might actually look good. Just slight. Yeah, that's kind of, see, this actually does, it really helps break it up just a tiny bit, because you can see some of them, it just makes it look more organic, so it's not so etched and perfect. Okay, so we could go ahead and I guess I should show this really quick. Like you can, you can make these smaller in one direction. I don't typically, want to use this for this one, but you could, your mileage may vary. So you might want something that looks more like that. So you can play around with those. Size, random. I would just say play around with these. Position offsets, you can offset them. Position random. Shape rotation. Okay, so gap is probably something you're going to want to mess with. So this is going to be really messing with the grout. And first of all, the grout color. So I don't really like this really light color. So I might want to make it less obvious. I could sample something from here. Let's see what it looks like with a darker grout. See if we like that. And again, everything takes time. Oof, that's a little too saturated for me. But then, you can just drop it down like that. See how that looks. One day this program will be fast. Let's look at that. That's okay. I don't know. I'm not in love with it. We'll just leave it like this. I'm sure this will be halfway decent. I thought it was too bright before. Yeah, it's a little bit less obvious now, especially because it has like a similar tone. Obviously, this is not metallic, so we're not going to do that. The gap height. So this is going to make it kind of like encroach closer to the edges. So, if you want really low, you can go that way. Go ahead and play around with it. Gap irregularity. So now this can make it like so it's kind of dips in places. So it's not like it's already doing that. So it's actually pretty good. So this is now it's less irregularity, and then you want more irregularity, and now you'll get it after it's done thinking. There you go. So that's a lot of lumpiness there. Age. So of course, like you might want like slopes happening on the floor. This is you get a lot of bang for your buck out of getting a little bit of different height, because we know that ground, like typically certain areas will sink a little bit, some will come out, and this will really help randomize that. And so even like when the light hits it, if you look at it from like an angle like this, it doesn't look like everything's super even. So that's kind of cool. Imperfections are already up. The damage, sometimes you don't really see this that much. So let's see how much it shows up. Yeah, I just don't see that much of a change with that. Dirt, you can do some of this stuff in other layers as well. So I'll just show the dirt. There we go. I actually think the dirt's probably pretty important for this. I think it unifies it, puts a little bit extra in the cracks, and then it just unifies the whole thing together. That actually looks a lot better to me. You can come up in the layers, so there's all kinds of stuff in here that you can play around with, read, find out what they do, watch tutorials if you can find them on YouTube or whatever, because there's so much to go through. And what we can do is we'll type in dirt. So we can just go ahead and just put a dirt on here, and it'll just, you'll have all these settings to add even more dirt. So let's go ahead and let's pull the 2D back a little bit so we can see it. So I'm going to do this like really obnoxious so we can see what's happening. It's a lot easier to see if you do something like radical. And it's got to think. It's still thinking. There you go. Yeah. So we're on Mars, and this is the red dust. This is just to give you an idea about what these things, what this is going to do. Obviously, dirt roughness, you should be able to make it look wet, So if you take this all the way down, you might be able to get like a wetness look to it, like you have kind of mud stuff sitting on top. Let's see if I can get the lighting to change. It's kind of chugging. It's a 4K. Yeah, there you go. So you can see kind of like you can see the shine on the dirt a little bit more. It's just indicating that it's kind of like wet. You know, but if we give it more height, it might be more obvious. And of course, this is kind of one of those things that it's always taking time. Let's see here, normal intensity. Yeah, let's turn this up. Let's see what it does. And then we'll call this a day. And we'll look at, yeah, there you go. So that now you get like, that's where it actually really looks like it's coming off the surface. Probably too much for my liking. At this point, you know, I can come back to maybe like somewhere down here. Not too saturated, maybe not too dark, maybe something like that. We'll get rid of our wonderful red dirt, and then probably take that normal intensity down a little bit, and maybe the roughness up. I think also the height probably needs to go down. Okay, so that's just a short little, you know, tutorial on how you can kick out. So you can get like 2 different materials just out of this one. There's a lot more. There's all kinds of different tiling that you can do in here. But I just thought getting you started with something simple would be great. All right, so thanks for watching, and you know, if you want to get these out, just remember, just export your maps that you need. In this case, you would want to definitely export a height map if you want to have that displacement. You make sure you at least have these and export those. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching.